Okay. Kun Lenin Ablat Gemara. We are up to Daf Lamed Hey Amud Aleph. We're continuing running through the activities of the Kohen Gadol. So we said he goes up to this chamber called Beis HaParveh, which is his chamber, and upstairs there is where his mikveh is, and that's all inside the Beis HaMikdash. Says, my Parveh, what is this Parveh? Amar Rabbi Yosef, Parveh Amgusha. He was a warlock. He was a wizard, sorcerer. And what happened was, according to the Taisa brings from the Aruch, the Ritva brings another Yosef, but basically is that he was very keen to know what the Kohen Gadol does Yom Kippur in the Kodesh HaKadosh. So he dug cave. You know, the Hamas were not the first ones to dig tunnels. He dug a tunnel under the Beis HaMikdash that ended up right underneath the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and he wanted to poke his head out and see what's happening. Somehow or another, the Kohanim realized there was a tunnel there, and they blocked it. And now, according to the Ritva, one of the Rishonim there say that they actually killed him. The other one said they didn't kill him, but they decided to call this chamber after him. Now, try to figure that out. This guy was a warlock. He was a Rasha. He was doing the wrong thing, and forever they gave him a tribute. As if to say, before he was Moise Nefesh to seal Kedusha, he deserves something positive. That's what it sounds like. That's right.
Well, it's interesting. He would have had that probably had started wrong.
We don't know any practical details of it. They don't tell us any practical details, so much to replicate it. He's asking how far was the tunnel from outside?
Yeah, not only that, but I'm assuming they probably had pretty decent stones before. Not stone.
The shaysh, the marble tablets.
Exactly.
So the fact that he was a sorcerer, what's the relevance of that? Was he trying to gain some tumah from Kodesh HaKadoshim he could use for his sorcery, or was he using the sorcery to break through the tunnel or something so that he could get to the? I'm saying maybe, don't know. But the fact that they called it after him, there has to be something positive. It can't be just negative. I wouldn't call him after. Shame to Shem Yirkov. You don't go Zeichet Tzadik Abrach Shame to Shem Yirkov. Exactly. Like Nicanor, we'll find out there's a good reason why they call Sharon Nicanor. There's Moise Nefesh for those doors. No, but he was Moise Nefesh. He was Moise Nefesh for it. Nothing. It wasn't the money. It was the fact that he rested. Remember, he jumped in and he saved the door, and the other door flowed up. We'll see. Taking it further. Porous sadin shabutz. They spread a sadin of linen. Maishno shabutz. Why after linen? Amar Kana kadeshi yake, that you should know shavoidus ayim big day boots. That today is the day of linen. Even though we already learned this is the second time they're spreading a sheet of linen. They already had a sheet of linen before. By the first mikvah, yeah, this is the second mikvah. Nevertheless, we're asking the question over here. There it says kedamar of Kana, and before we already asked why Rav Kana made his Rav Kana second one on the first one.
What's this thing of reminding me? That's supplying the class.
That's reminding everybody that it's also a choshev thing.
Oh, yeah.
In the morning, he wore a more expensive dress than in the afternoon, and it was a third more. The question was it 18 and 12, or was it 12 and 8? So plusin is the kind of fabric from a place called plusin. Says why tells us Sachaka was 30? How come Masha tell you the bots of Mahani Loinavid don't make less than a total of 30? But the Gemara said, but ha e bots of Mahani, but Tofihani less lamba. That if you, let's say, made the shachar is a bit less valuable or a bit more valuable, and the afternoon a bit more valuable, less valuable, you don't really care as long as the total sum equals 30 more. The Kuli Amir the shachar, everyone seems to be clearly hold, but whichever opinion you hold on Meir or the Chachamim. The dress you wore in the morning was more significant, more valuable than you wore in the afternoon. Why is that so? Minolan, how do you know? I said the pasuk bad. The pasuk said Ksayid is bad, Yilba, he said Ksayid is bad. Then it says Michin say bad, and then it says Avne bad, and it says it's never bad. Why is it 4 times bad? So we say the Taisa gives a few ways of learning it. But the first one you need to tell you Pasha linen. And one you need to say only this, and not you would think 4 of linen and 4 of big dezal, which is what no, you don't do that either. And then the next one is the bad that you're going to wear should be the best quality of bad. That's one of the Pshatim cases. Says the Gemara further. Mesa will ask a question. It says in the pasuk we had in Gemara Tainus. Having more kindness, that there's certain things that we did that Yecheskel, there's certain things written in Yecheskel that we don't have in the Torah. So you wants to know what that means. I didn't do it, and then only Yecheskel introduces. I said no, it was always done, but Yecheskel recorded it. We had a few examples. So Moses says, here's another example. It says in the pasuk when what he says we love the love should be God in the kohen then comes back in and he puts on other clothes. We're talking about Yom Kippur, not the rest of the year. And it says, well, that's one part of the pasuk. Another part of the pasuk, they shouldn't go outside the base. Maybe it's wearing their ordinary avodah clothes. They shouldn't join the rest. But the luxury of God to Macheda means that on Yom Kippur they put on other clothes.
Personal clothing, or it means
from Zov to Bad. And it says in the pasuk they also will they shouldn't wear wool, and the rest of the year one of the clothing is made out of wool. So therefore, we also had there's a according to one day the gartel was made out of wool and linen. So obviously we're talking about Yom Kippur when you had Bad, only thing you had was linen. And it says when you come out to the chatzah, you take out your clothes and you put on other clothes. And it sounds like that what he's saying here is the clothes you wear in the afternoon should not be the same clothes you wore in the morning. The big dipad you wore in the morning is when you at night, when you put on the again to do the avodah b'pnim, you wear different clothes than the first one. Even though it was always that way, but the Cheskel recorded it. Says he went further. My lava chedim chashuvim mehen. The second clothes, we all agree. The Mishnah said you wear two separate clothes, but it sounds from here the godim achedim is more chashuv than the first one. We said no, achedim chus mehen, that it's less chashuv. That it is different, but the difference is that it's actually less valuable. Why? Because the first avodah is much more chashuv. Because what do you do in the afternoon? Remember we learned before, they deliberately pushed aside, they had to go back in again just to retrieve the kaf, the machta. There's no real avodah. In fact, it's not even avodah, but just taking it back for himself. So therefore, you wear less expensive clothes at night. So Rabbi Huda Bar Yehuda said, after he completed the avodah for the community, kohen a kohen. Remember that the mothers sometimes used to make them very nice clothes to show their wealth, to show how special the son is. Loisha, he will put it on now, and he does his personal avodah. Provided now, what's the personal avodah? We're referring to removing the kaf and the machtas. For that, he would wear clothes, not the clothes from the coppers, but he would wear clothes that his mother made for him. And it's not a communal service because there's no kapara for anybody else. Just to clean out the place, as Rashi says. Way before in the morning. Yeah, eyes outside. That's big deal.
He's personal.
It's all part of outside. There's not a all the kohenim. There's nothing personal. And then he does for all the kohenim as well. It's the only thing that he does. We're calling avodas yachid is going in and taking out the kavamach. Ready gemara. Well, sorry. What's if it's only avodas yachid? Why can't it be his mother's clothes? And and you're saying the condition is you have to give it over to the tzibur. So what's the big deal? Well, of course we'll give it over to the tzibur. Why not? And this is also really avodah tzibur, even though it's not a kapara for anybody. But the fact of the matter is, nothing he's doing there is for himself. Taking out the kav and the machta is not really avodah yachid. Says the Gemara. No. So the kav and machta is taking out is not really avodah yachid. You bring your own minchah. Oh yeah, the money donated. The clothing has to be communal clothing. Rashi said he had another shot that Kohen reads that. Remember at night he stays up all night. He reads the clothes he wore at that time, but that's just like the shot. Says the pshita isn't it obvious? He's allowed to work with the city. Get rid of it, of course he's allowed. Nay, Mauzi would have thought. Maybe he won't give it wholeheartedly. Mashallah, that we trust the Kohen God will give it over wholeheartedly. We trust to give it over wholeheartedly. Yeah. Then further.
When we say mother, is it just the mother, or is it an expression of just privately owned?
Good question. It's only a mother. No, the mother is proud. Proud of her.
Yeah, and he doesn't.
We had before that. Remember mitzvah gadleu that you suppose there's a mitzvah to make him rich. So maybe anybody could do it. Maybe anybody. I mean, yeah. Exactly.
You can't rise there. So,
Exactly.
What you're asking is if the mother doesn't make it, does it still have to be
That's right.
private? Does it have to be
Exactly, I
transferred?
put an expression.
Or can you get it out? Can you get
Right.
it out? Can you get out of the
Taisha already asked, how come we had the Shkolim? This was Shkolim, but we had the Shkolim. Machlekes. Do people actually give it over? Remember, we had if you can pay the workers who take care of mine, the Omer, can you pay them from the communal offers or private people who should have to be volunteers? And we had an opinion that says, we're always worried. Why is this different? This is the Kohen Gadol, the Gadol Talmud Chacham. But we go on the first base of Mikdash.
Thomas Hoffman had to bring took him to one because he couldn't touch it.
So exactly.
It's a cow.
Who Gadol Batoyre the Yodeya Sheyesh Lim Tzoyot. Or they tell him. If he doesn't know, then maybe they tell him. And Nachazat says, what's the whole thing? He's giving over to the, but he's the one who's benefiting from it. In all the other cases that, will they give it over to the base of Mikdash to the traders, 100% because he works for himself? Questionable. But over here, he's giving the clothes to the base of Mikdash, but who's wearing it? He is. So he's happy to give it to the base of Mikdash because then it's all for him anyway. Doesn't have to hold anything back. Think about it further. His mother made him a clothes. I think 12 mana was a lot. 100 mana. The loivsha and he should wear it. He did that avoid yachid thing at the kavamachta umasr letzibur, and he gave it over to the tzibur. Amru Allah Rabbi Lazar ben Charsim. They said about the town about Charsim. He had to outdo the other one. His mother made him a ksayis mishtei from 20,000. What's it called? From 20,000 mother. You hear that? They refused to allow him to wear him. They should need to cut him. He looked naked. You don't understand. A couple she should have to be, woven 6 strands. It's like wine in a transparent glass. In other words, the material was so translucent. You can see it, transparent. You can see right through.
interesting how many one of these guys said this kind
As soon as they, Rosh Hashanah was a big tzaddik.
yes, so he must have been quite a few years.
We don't know the year. Remember, we had him full of tests. We made a cheshbon of all the years, and we brought his name down. It says he probably years also. It's exactly. The thing is, as soon as they left the Kuda, what happened to those clothes? And Ahmed, we learned that the clothes you had for one coin being nicham sham. It says no, that's only one opinion. Abdesha says that you gave it to the coin hedyot, but according to they put it in a box. Imagine you spent all that money for 5 minutes, 15 minutes of favor. That's exactly what it is.
For the color for the customer base.
No, you give us another color, so on. Exactly. But this is literally where 15 minutes of fame comes from. But all this money. So we had over here, Shlomo Pabi. Remember, we had the Shlomo Pabi. His family were terrible, but he was a tzaddik and psochim. But then, Rabbi Loza ben Charsim. 10 years, 11 years. 11 years of the Kohen Gadol. Yeah, it was definitely a tzaddik. You'll see anyone in a minute, but about Chazik, what tzaddik he was. Let's continue the Gemara.
Can't even wear.
Says the Gemara about that's right. How many people who wear the kapata they wore the chas? Says the Gemara. Tell them what we learned. Oh, now so tell them what we learned. Now that you mentioned was chas, things are very interesting. Oni, an man, a poor person, but Russia, a wealthy man, Russia, boyin ledin, when they go to Shemaim after 120 years old. And they're going to ask a question. Remember, we had the first question to ask you with faces of Shabbos that discusses what's the first one. But we generally say the first one is if you did Torah. Sakta b'Torah. Did you learn Torah? So they're going to ask these 3 people, or a poor person, a rich person, in Russia, did you learn Torah? Each one has an excuse. The Bezdin already has an answer prepared. Boyin ledin la'oni, to the poor man, I know they say, why didn't you learn Torah? What do you want from me? I was a poor person. The Torah was a nice. I had to go and schlep money for people. I was busy all day. Were you poorer than Hill? You know what we know about Hill Zakir? They say about Hill Zakir, every day, every day he went out there and he earned a coin called the Tarfoyik. And what do you call it? And Rashi says a half a dinner. Not much. Chetzia hinoisin l'shem beis hamedrash. Half he gave to the guard of the beis hamedrash. V'chetzia leparnosasa for his the parnosa anshe beis. Big question mark the Chachreim talk about is what's the shem? What are you paying the shem beis? Is he paying tuition to go in? I'll take money for teaching Torah. Is he paying the and if you're paying for tuition and everything else, it says by mitzvah you shouldn't do more than 20%. It says by mitzvah say you don't spend more than 20%. Here's half. What's going on over here? So some views that I've made when it says no more 20, it's not to do more than 20, just for like advice. Yeah, and it's not only by the stocker. We say across the board. All mitzvahs. When it comes to Leisa says, oh, you come and say there's no limit to how much money. But it comes to not say only a fifth. And the Mishnah Berurah there, but if you have to spend, if you can't afford to buy a tefillin, you're chayim wearing tefillin, or you're just an honest, you don't have to. You have to go find somebody else to tefillin every day, or you just pop it. Big machlek is achrein. Anyway, big discussion. Or was he just paying the corrupt guard money? Because it doesn't say he was paying to the Mamuna, he was saying paying to the Shomer. What was it protecting from? Who was he holding out? So Hillel, for whatever reason, was not allowed inside the Beis HaMedrash. So we don't know the details behind the stories. A lot of details missing. Anyway, the Nitla, so what did he do? The Nitla, he went up onto he climbed up and he lied down. But Yosef Arubi sat down on the skylight. To hear the words of the Eibusher. No, Shmai Bavtalia. This is what we have Dibur L'Kim Chaim from was an Erevit. The Shmai Bavtalia, between the Donossi and the Avnes. Amru Oisa Hayom Erev Shabbos. Oh yeah, we're going to learn a very interesting Gemara at the end of Yoma about Shmai Bavtalia, the end of Yom Kippur. How Kohen Gadol made some very snide comment to them, but they responded. Anyway, Amru, they weren't tapluch. Amru, they said Oisa that day Erev Shabbos. Oh yeah, that day was Friday. Ut Kufas Teva in the middle of winter. So what actually happened is hard to understand. He went up on Friday to go when? To hear which shir, the Friday shir or the Shabbos shir?
Friday night.
It can't be Friday. If it can't be Friday morning because it says look at the story. It's hard to figure out exactly what happened. When it came in the morning, are we talking about Friday morning or Shabbos morning? Italian. Every day in this time of the day, see the sunlight. It's dark. Shema Yom Amun, maybe it's a cloudy day. Hey, Titzu a name, they lifted their eyes, they saw a person, the image of a person formed on top of the skylight.
No.
So they didn't let him in.
Mr. Taylor.
So they didn't let him in. He wasn't a chacham.
When the light came on, and I was a little Mr. Suddenly.
When did this happen? Shabbos or Friday? Look at him more further. They found the height of 3 amas, like an avalanche. Porku, he was unconscious. Porku, they removed the snow. Vechitzu, they bathed him. Vesichu, and they anointed him. Vaishivu keneged amadur, put him next to the fire. Amru rozel lechal over Shabbos. That was happening on Shabbos. So what happened? So when, so why couldn't you go and for Shabbos morning then? And when did they collect? What for Shabbos morning they collected money when? How did it work? For Shabbos morning, they collected money. When did they collect the money? On Friday. But this is Shabbos. In the morning. In the morning.
He went on Friday.
Why did they learn Friday night and this? When I start by day. What does this stuff do with the Friday night? Friday night? It seems to me that the shir was only in the day. It wasn't at night. The shir was in the day. He went. They paid money Friday to go to a shir on Shabbos. So the guard was collecting money from everybody. So then he wouldn't let him in. So why do you have to climb Friday afternoon? You come Shabbos morning in the middle of the or early night and climb up then. What happened? And why didn't the guard observe him climbing up? There's a guard, a shomer. That's his job. Something is missing in the story. What actually happened here? Anyway, Signora says further. So that's Hila. So nobody's. So obviously he was extremely poor. But the question is, the poor man will say he elected to be so poor. If he would have kept the whole money for himself to feed his family, he could have had. He could have did. And he made his family starve and everything else, and he spent more than he had to. You want me to do the same thing? It's a shayla halacha how we did what he did. And what do you want me to do? What's a tiny little bit of shayla to me?
She's talking about his wife. And like the Tanya Chaim Sorim, this should be more than Chaim Ruchnim. You're spending on Chaim Sorim, you're going to go to your fortune.
Keep calling me Ben Yoda.
Ben Ish Chai. But that's all no drush. In a halacha, like what happened there? How can you have kindness to a poor person? You want him to give away all his money and not to give to his family? What do you want? Anyway, it all needs explanation. Or if I would be the advocate of the poor person, that's what I would say to Bezos Shabayla. Leave him go. Next, the Osher. Osher, why did you learn Torah? You see, I was very rich and Torah. He said I was busy all the time with meetings and appointments, and as a writer, been the chasai taking care of my possessions. Were you a greater man than Rabbi Lazar ben Chasim? Look at this pan here. We're talking about Torah now. Remember, our question here is why didn't you learn Torah? We're not asking about anything else. Look at this man. His father, no, he didn't earn it because he sat alert. Yeah, exactly, big deal. Yasher for his father, 1,000 cities Bayabosh on dry land. Who connect on Elis Finis Bayam, and corresponding to that, the Gemara is making it sound like it's real. But every day, he would take a jug or a canteen of flour on his shoulder to go make some bread somewhere. He traveled from city to city like a nomad. From country to country. He wanted to pursue his learning of Torah and going to different Rabbanic yeshivas. One time his servants found him. They never knew who he was, but they never saw him. For Asabayangaria, they started to rule over him. They said, "Oh, the owner of these cities is the Rabbi Chasim. Go work for him. Do me a favor, let me go." He didn't want to tell them who he was. Maybe they wouldn't believe him. They had no idea who he was. Go learn Torah. We're swearing the name of our master, Rabbi Lazar ben Chasim. We are not going to let you. He never saw that. He never went back to see what he's doing. Again, I'll be the advocate of the Usher said he never earned a penny in his life. It was all there for him, so it meant nothing to him. But if I worked very hard, I had nothing. My father and my mother left me no money, not a piastra. I had to work hard. I had to work. So what do you want me to do? In other words, I think the whole point of the money is we're leaving space for people to actually have a TED. It's why they didn't learn enough TED. We have a tiny to them, let them come up with an answer. The last one is, what is it? Russia. The guy was a Russian. You're a Russian. Why did you learn TED? You see, I was very handsome with Torah, but you see, what I do, all these women were chasing after me. I had no breda. I'm the victim. I'm the victim of Yetzirah. They say to him, in fact, the Gemara Kedusha, at the end we have when Mashiach will come, they'll see the Yetzirah, whether it's the size of a mountain or the size of a nail, right? But the Gemara here doesn't bring that. Instead, we bring down a mice of Yosef. Why we bring Yosef last when Yosef chronologically was first? And Rabbi Lazar and Chasim was also earlier. We should have had the other way around. The whole order should be the other way around. It's because there are a lot more aniyim out there in the world that we have time to about learning, especially in those days, than anybody else. And next we're Ashirim, and Rishayim looks like it was far less. It goes in maybe in the order of how many, I'm just guessing, how many people there were. That's why they started with aniyim, then we go to the Ashirim, and then we work our way to the Rishayim. We're obviously not talking about certain kind of Rishayim that should have known better. Could we compare him with the Yosef Tzaddik? What are you comparing a Rasha to Yosef Tzaddik? Talk about a Rasha who had a good upbringing, and then he became a Rasha. And his excuse is, it's circumstances. I'm a victim. So they say, look at Yosef Tzaddik. Every single day, the wife Potiphar tried to seduce him. The Godim Shalav Shalashachis, she would dress him and they brought him new clothes every single day. The Godim Shalav Shalashachis, every morning, even like a plain goggle, new clothes every time. Why don't you listen to what I have to say? No. She said, I'm threatening you. If you don't listen to me, I am going to imprison you. He said, he broke order the pasuk. Hashem, you can put me in prison, maybe she will release me if I'm deserved to be released. She said, you're so proud, I am going to make you bend over and lose your pride. Hashem's like, it's up to Abraham. She goes, when you're proud, I'll stand up. I'll blind you. Hashem, the Shachem Etzlam. Leah's Ima. She gave him $1,000 and just to listen and lie next to him, even with the clothes on, just to lie. Leah's Ima, to be with her. It sounds like he took the money, but he didn't want to listen to her about all the other things. The Shachem, and we teach. The Shachem Etzlo, what do you mean? What was a request for Olam Hazeh? And Leah's Ima, Olam Habu. She had a premonition that there is going to be a shaykhis between her and Yosef. It wasn't Stamazeh. And it turned out to be her daughter ended up marrying Yosef, and that was her mistake. She thought it was her. It was actually a daughter.
His mother-in-law.
How come it was she a bit? Good question.
There must have been a bit of trouble going on there at some stage.
Maybe that's what Gemara said. Remember, we
He
had to
said
be
she
very
was there.
careful between a mother-in-law and the first son-in-law. Maybe he imprisoned him for 13 years. Yeah. Rabbi Elazar ben Chasim Mechayev Sashiri. Rabbi Mechayev obligates all the wealthy. Yosef Mechayev Sashim and Yosef. Sorry, Hil Mechayev Sanim. Rabbi Elazar Mechayev Sashiri. Mechayev Sashim. The Maram Shif said when he learned this Gemara, there's one other group of people category that was left out, and I'm going to be Mechayev. The guy goes to Shemayim and say Sakta B'Torah, and he says, "You didn't give me a cup. I stopped the cup. I couldn't learn. My head was it just didn't work. I couldn't learn." So they said. The Maram Shif, there was no one who had a more blocked head and dumber than the Maram Shif, and he became himself. Only he could say himself. And he became the Maram Shif. Now, if you learn the Maram Shif, you ever learned it? You know, the Mashal likes to go into Pshat and Gribble. The Maram is a bit more superficial. You go to Maram Shif, he doesn't stop. You know, the Mashal stops over here. He goes like this, like this, like this, like this. You can see it's a guy who's working in his mind every step of the Gemara, and he doesn't let go. He doesn't understand fully. He has to go further and further up. It's called in Yiddish, Adur Ga'ab, it's a cup through and through. That's what he said about it.
Not a natural move. It's
No.
ideal.
Like the Alter Rebbe said, the different Rishonim Acharayim is because they asked him, some big godel. The Rishonim have 10 lines. Acharayim go pages and pages and pages and go one question. Alter Rebbe said that you think the Rishonim didn't know all these questions Acharayim said, but they Chatchila saw the light. So in those 10 lines, they covered all the questions, but they don't have to go to the questions. We in a lower generation, we have to gribble. Okay, you have a question, lead you to the next answer question. And that's what Ram Shif said about himself. That's the name, yeah. Or the Mashal, the two versions.
So if you got Ruach HaKodesh, it wouldn't be easy. If you're working without it, you got to work harder.
Okay. Well, the Ram Shif was the same time as Mashal. So, yeah. Anyway, let's continue. Mishnah Bolloy Eitzel Pori. The Kohen goes to continue when he goes to his bull. Pori Hayim Ben Ulam Mizbeach. If you have a picture, you'll see that the part itself was standing between the Ulam and the Mizbeach. Big Machlek is the Rambam and others showing him where exactly where the part was. Was it like back facing the Mizbeach itself, or right in front of the Mizbeach on the north side? But he came to the bull, and the bull was standing between the Ulam and the Mizbeach, right? So the antechamber there and the Mizbeach. But it wasn't the animal itself was positioned that the head was facing the south, not the base of Mikdash of the Mizbeach, and the back, the hind quarter, the tail was facing the north, the walls of the base of Mikdash. But his head, they just tilted the head towards the Ulam. The Kohen himself was standing on the east side. And the Kohen was standing on the east side, right? So he was facing on the east side of the animal, but his back was facing the Mizbech. He was standing on the east side, behind the animal, and facing on the other side of the animal, right? The animal was the animal was north south, so he was standing on the side of the animal closer to his back. That's right. So he was the other side of the animal was back to his back, facing the thing. Because so Rashi the Rambam holds that he was standing in front of his back. Nothing was behind his back. Upon of Lamaidev, and it faces to Maidev. But again, facing the base of Mikdash. The same and he placed two of his hands and leaned on an animal. And he said, "This is bidik." This is what we say in our davening. Ono Hashem of VC push. The order is as follows: first you say VC, then you say Pashaiti, and then you say Chatosi. I said, "You are me, you basi, I and my family." Then you say Ono Hashem. The machlek is exactly which shame. What did he use? It was UK Vavke, was a shame on the Flatish of 42 letters. Oh, not shame. Again, the same order. Avoinus, the Pshaim Lechatayim. Shavitzi Shabashati Chatosh Nechani, basically, a cosplay of the certain year title. On this day, you'll be Mechaper, Yom Kippur, Mechaper, and so on. And everyone responds, Baruch Shem, Kivoy Machus Olam Voed. That is today's blot. We'll continue in Mitzvah Hashem.